Video game adaptations have long had a reputation of being bad. It's almost like there's a curse for them. However, there have been several movies in recent years that have resonated well with audiences and have been very successful. Has the curse been broken? Have video game movies finally begun to be good? Let's take a look through different periods of video game movies and see how they've started and how they've come. In the end, I'll crunch some numbers and look at the trends in video game movies to see if they've gotten better scores over time by looking at both audience and critic scores. I'll also talk about TV shows based on video games and video game adjacent movies. Before we get started, I wanted to again thank you all for crushing our 100 subscribers goal. Now we're almost to 300. As a reward, I let you all vote on which video I should do next, and this video tied with the last one. Video game movie and television adaptations started around the period of the NES and Super Nintendo. Before that, games were a little too primitive to make movie adaptations of. No one was going to make a movie based on Cat and Mouse for the Odyssey or Yar's Revenge for the Atari 2600. While there weren't any movie adaptations, there were plenty of game adaptations of movies, like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Halloween, and the infamous E.T. game. The first video game movie was the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which was released on May 28, 1993. This started the early period of video game movies, which took place during the 90s. I haven't watched the movie, but from what I've seen, it was a very weird movie. Just look at these screenshots from it. Does this even look like a Mario movie? There's a lot of weird things in the movie. For example, the Mario Brothers and Bowser used the Super Scope, which was a peripheral for the Super Nintendo. Gotta get that product placement in. Another weird part is when Mario and Luigi are asked for their last names, and they say Mario. So Mario's name is Mario. It's as dumb as it sounds.
Name? Mario. Last name?
Mario.
Okay, what's your name?
Luigi.
Luigi?
No, Luigi Mario.
Okay, look, how many Marios are there between the two of you?
There's three. There's Mario, and Luigi Mario.
Were they trying to be funny, or did they just not know what last name to give Luigi and Mario? There's a lot of other weird things about the movie. Maybe one day I'll watch it and make a video about it. After the Mario movie, we got a few movies based on fighting games, which were hugely popular during this time period. We got the Street Fighter movie in 94, and Mortal Kombat in 95, and Mortal Kombat Annihilation in 97. These movies weren't great, although I do know a lot of people enjoyed the first Mortal Kombat movie. These movies had a lot of qualities to them that could put them in the so bad it's good category, or at least be an entertaining watch. From M. Bison in the Street Fighter movie to the horrible CGI in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I mean, look at this.
Oh, nah, I done seen everything.
These movies were super cheesy and pretty poorly made and acted. You could definitely have some fun and laughs watching them, but they're not great movies. Let's move on to the next era of movies, which I'll call the Resident Evil era, starting with Resident Evil, which came out in 2002, to 2017's Resident Evil The Final Chapter, not to be confused with Saw The Final Chapter, both of which were not the last of their movies to come out. A lot of the movies during this time were met with poor to really poor reviews. The biggest stinkers of these were directed by Uwe Ball. Ball became famous for making horrible video game adaptations, like really bad, like 2s on IMDb bad.
You're doing a great job! A great job! A great job!
They're probably the worst adaptations we've seen. His adaptation of Alone in the Dark has a 9 out of 100 critic score on Metacritic, and the New York Times gave it a 0. I haven't watched any of his movies personally, but I have watched YouTube videos talking about them. One of the worst of them has to be the House of the Dead movie. This movie is pretty horrible, with one reviewer on IMDb calling it possibly the worst movie ever made. It has some of the most jarring editing I've ever seen in my entire life. They literally put clips of the House of the Dead game into the movie. There will be a fight scene, and then suddenly gameplay of zombies being shot will appear. I mean, just look at this. How could they do that? It's so bad. One other thing that Ball is famous for is challenging his critics to boxing matches. I'm not kidding, he's challenged a bunch of his most vocal critics to matches, and even challenged Alex Jones to a match in 2018.
But I will stomp your head in if you start a fight with me, you thug scum.
Besides Uwe Ball films, we got a lot of other movies during this time period. As I previously mentioned, we got a lot of Resident Evil movies, 6 of them to be exact. All of them met with pretty mediocre reviews. We also got other films like Prince of Persia, Hitman, Max Payne, Warcraft, and Assassin's Creed, which were all met with much of the same criticism. We also got 2 Silent Hill movies, which I know there are a lot of fans of the first one, but not many fans of the second. Now let's move on to the modern age of video game adaptations. One of the first movies I saw of this era was Rampage, which stars The Rock. I thought it was an alright movie. I had played the Rampage games as a kid, and while I don't think it had a ton to do with the games, it was still an okay movie. Detective Pikachu and Sonic 1 and 2 received decent reviews from audiences, while Uncharted received mixed reviews. I haven't seen it. I remember when it was announced, I was not very excited with the casting choices for Drake and Sully. The 2 big video game movies that came out last year were Mario Bros. And Five Nights at Freddy's. These movies were both extremely successful. I saw both and enjoyed them. They aren't amazing movies, but they are faithful adaptations, and I enjoyed my time watching them. In my opinion, critics were too harsh on these movies, but I mean, we've seen critics have a ton of bad takes, so we shouldn't put too much stock into them nowadays anyways. Another movie that came out last year was Gran Turismo, which was received pretty well. I haven't seen it myself, so I can't say much about it. Next, I want to talk about what I would consider to be video game adjacent movies. These are movies that have video game themes, feature video game elements in them, or are about video games, but are not based on a specific video game. One of the first of these kinds of movies has to be The Wizard. This movie is about a kid traveling to compete in a huge video game tournament. 2 notable things in this movie are the Power Glove scene and the tournament at the end. During the tournament, Super Mario Bros. 3 was announced to the world.
Super Mario Brothers 3!
This still has to be one of the coolest ways to announce a new video game. A few other movies I would put in this category that I have seen are Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Wreck-It Ralph, and Ready Player One. I enjoyed all of these movies, especially Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It's probably one of my favorites. Now let's look at video game TV shows. We've gotten quite a few Mario and Sonic shows. At first, these shows were pretty silly, like the Do the Mario Dance, and Sonic being voiced by the same actor who played Steve Urkel, and always talking about chili dogs for some reason. But later on, the Sonic shows got more serious and still have lots of fans. There was also Captain N the Game Master, which featured various video game characters including Mega Man, Kid Icarus, and Simon Belmont, all of which look pretty bad to be honest. Look at these comparison images and try to tell me they look good. They were based off 8-bit sprites, so they had to take some liberties, but they couldn't even make Mega Man blue? There's also the Legend of Zelda TV show, where Link had his infamous catchphrase.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Of course, I have to mention the Pokemon TV show, which is one I watched as a kid. This show has been going on strong for a long time with tons of different series and movies being released. There were a lot of random video game TV shows after this period, and we could be here all day, so I'm going to skip to modern times, where video game TV shows have started to become a big thing. We've gotten a handful of live-action TV shows recently that have seen all sorts of reception. Ones that have been received very well include The Last of Us, Twisted Metal, and very recently Fallout. The Halo TV show has received mixed reviews, and the Resident Evil show is pretty much an abomination.
No, don't like that.
Looking at recent animated shows, there have also been some very well received ones, like Cyberpunk Edgerunners and Castlevania, but there's one that I want to specifically talk about.
Tell me you're the greatest, but once you turn, they hate us. Oh, the misery. Every single person.
That's right, Netflix's Arcane, winner of 2022's Best Video Game Adaptation. Even though I haven't played League of Legends, I had kind of a distaste for it growing up. When I was a kid, one of my favorite games was Warcraft 3. I loved to play the campaign, make custom maps, and play custom games online. If you played during this time, you know that the most popular custom maps were Dota maps, which were the inspiration for League of Legends and Dota 2. I didn't like Dota though. I wanted to play other maps like Freeze Tag, Sheep Tag, Tower Defense games, Run Kitty Run, Life of a Peasant, or other games. There was such a great variety of custom games to play online, and I was was always annoyed that 90% of the games to join were Dota games when I wanted to play other games. Flash forward to now, I had heard a lot of good things about Arcane and decided to check it out. It's a great show. This is how you do a video game adaptation. It includes many League of Legends characters, but does its own story and has lots of its own characters as well. Even though I don't play League, I've really enjoyed everything about the show, from its great animation to the characters to the amazing soundtrack. After watching the show, I'd listen to the album from time to time. It's so good. If you have Netflix and haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. We've gone from weird and cheesy to bad to really good adaptations. So have video game adaptations actually gotten better? I compiled some data together so we can see visually if they have or not. I'm only focusing on video game movies for this. I didn't have enough data to include TV shows, and this video is focusing more on movies anyways. To gather the data, I went through time and selected 41 movies based on video games. The releases range from 1993 all the way to 2023. I made sure to include a good amount of movies from each time period to make things fair. We're going to look at the IMDb and Metacritic scores to see what audiences and critics thought of these movies. I prefer those sites over Rotten Tomatoes because the way it uses scores is better. Users can rate on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 instead of basically just giving a thumbs up or thumbs down. This should give us a more accurate account of what both general audiences and critics thought of these movies. Here's a scatterplot of the scores that I created in Excel. The blue dots represent IMDb scores, while the orange dots represent the Metacritic scores. I converted both scores to be out of 100. Just looking at this graph, it can be hard to visualize whether the scores are getting higher, so here's the graph with a trend line added for the IMDb scores. This shows that the trend of scores from general audiences is going up over time. Here's the same graph, but with the trend line added for Metacritic scores. This line is lower than the previous one, which means the overall critic scores tend to be lower than the audience ones. But the line is still going up, which shows that critic scores for video game adaptation movies have risen over time. The data shows that the reception for video game adaptations has gotten better over time. In my opinion, we can take this to mean that generally, video game adaptations have gotten better. I don't know if we are safe to say the curse has been completely broken, but I do think we are seeing much better adaptations than we were before. I mean, it'll be pretty hard to make something as bad as some of the movies we got in the late 90s and 2000s. I hope that people are finally learning how to adapt video games to film and television. They were able to adapt fairy tales, books, comic books, and other sources to film with a lot of success. But for a long time, it seems like they couldn't get video games right. It looks like things are starting to take a turn for the better. With the success of the Mario movie and Five Nights at Freddy's last year, I think we'll see more video game adaptations soon. It may even be the next big thing, like how superhero movies have been a big thing for a while. Let's hope there are many great movies and shows to come. What is your favorite video game adaptation? Leave a comment below about which ones you've enjoyed. If you liked this video, please subscribe and leave a like. Our new sub goal is to get to 500 subscribers. If you're part of the 99% of people who watch my videos and aren't subscribed, please subscribe for more quality content like this. I'm back from my break and I'm going to be trying to release 1 or more videos a week now. Thanks for watching this video and for your support of the channel.